Hello and welcome to another Stellarian Games video. In this episode, we're going to be looking at how to make some beds. Some regular tavern type beds, as well as a little bit more of an ornate bed, a circular bed with a lamp hanging over the top of it. These beds can be used for a number of different purposes for tabletop games, but especially if you're entering a character's room and you needed to have some beds that the characters could interact with, hide around, or sneak up on, etc. So this is a relatively simple project, but it does use a hot wire cutter pretty extensively, and if you don't have one of those, my method would be a little bit more challenging. So if you have a hot wire cutter, this should be pretty straightforward, and you should be able to follow this pretty easily. So let's go to the tabletop and see how this is done. Okay, for this craft, we're going to just start with a scrap of 3/4 inch XPS foam. I'm just marking out some rough sizes for these beds and cutting it out so that I can start using the hot wire cutter. I'm going to line it up so that I get a good straight even cut on the side. I don't really trust the knife blade to be perfectly vertical, so I usually like to run a hot wire cut first so that I get a good square cut. And I'm just going to cut these into the correct sizes to start whittling away at the beds. I'm lining up my guide so that I can insert the hot wire and cut away so that I can start creating the end bed frames and the bed posts underneath. You can see I'm just changing the guide and cutting in just slightly. Now for these, I'm cutting in on the end of those bed frames just a millimeter of foam that will create the illusion of those posts on the end. Then I'm going to be cutting in the sideways ones to leave only those corner posts as what touches ground and stands up in the air. I'm doing a curved arc on this one to make more of a decorative end bed frame. Now going back over to the table, I'm using a brand new X-Acto blade so that it is very, very sharp, so I get good clean cuts. I'm going to start using the blade to remove parts that the hot wire just couldn't cut in and give more of that illusion of depth on the beds. On the edges, I'm going to use the blade to cut away in a little bit more rough feel to give it the feel that it's a stuffed mattress rather than kind of a modern mattress with good square edges. Now I'm cutting in the what would be kind of the rolled over edge of a blanket or a quilt, and then using the blade to cut off the rest of the quilt so that it has a little bit lower profile than the rest of it. I also left what would be the pillows up at the top, so just trying to leave and cut away what is necessary. So this is really not a craft where I'm adding in any other shapes. This is all just cut from the original piece. A subtractive process. And again, cutting in a little bit more of those details to give that illusion of blankets folded over and just the overall texture of the bed. I'm using this ballpoint pen to cut in some of those lines a little bit more firm, and then using it to texture what would be the quilt. So this is going to be the quilt texture on the blanket. Texturing the end bed frames as well, giving them some decoration. Now we're going to start working on the ornate bed. I'm using my circle cutter, which has that spike in the middle that allows me to cut in circles, move it in a little bit closer, and cutting out this outer ring.
This outer ring will be the bed frame. The inner part will be the mattress eventually. So we're cutting the mattress at one height and then the frame just a little bit lower and then curving it out so that it has a little bit of a rise to it. Now just going to cut in and start decorating that bed frame. Part of that arch that we cut off earlier will form the overhead hanging arch. And now I'm going to use a ballpoint pen to start texturing in, just giving it some patterns and details to make the bed frame look ornate and interesting and, maybe in some circumstances, possibly even magical. Also texturing the upright portion of that bed frame and continuing that pattern up on the inside a little bit. Now I'm just scuffing up the outside of it to make the mattress look a little bit soft, and then putting in a dot, which will be kind of the button points or something to make this mattress feel a little bit more textured and pillowy. Using the back end of a magic marker to soften up and give it more of a pillow look. Then using a ballpoint pen to make those lines a little bit firmer to make them kind of cushioned and finish out that detail. Now I'm going to be carving out by hand some pillows to go on top of this bed. Inserting some pins, putting it in one direction and then reversing it and putting in the other direction so that those pins will hold the upright once it's in place. Just adding a little bit of tacky glue and inserting those pins. Adding a little glue to the outside of the mattress as well and inserting that. I'm going to use some small tiny push pins and go around the whole outside to give it another piece of interest on the outside of the bed. Gluing those hand carved pillows into place. Once all of that is done, then we can start painting. We're using a black paint and Mod Podge as the base coat, so give it a nice firm coat over the whole thing. The Mod Podge gives it a little bit of a hard texture as well. Then for the beds, starting with a dark brown base coat for the wood bed frames. And then switching it up to lighter tan and kind of bleeding that in even while the brown paint is a little bit wet still to give it a little bit more of that wood texture. And then gave the quilt that same kind of caramel color. Now on the ornate bed, we're going to paint the whole frame in this gold color. I didn't paint it fully solid. I left it somewhat dry brushed, but kind of heavily overbrushed, I guess. Give it more of a brass look. Now switching to a linen color for the pillows and sheets for the beds. And coming in with some green to give the quilts on those other two beds some color. On this one, I'm just painting every other quilt square and then coming in with some red and filling in the other squares to give it a little bit more of a color interest. Then painting the mattress on this ornate one with a solid purple and mixing a little bit of white into it to be able to do some highlights and the pillows for that bed. And lastly, this is just a little bit of another bit from another kit that I had. Painted that up gold, and that's going to be our lamp, and glue that into place hanging down. So here are the final products. You can see the lamp hanging down from this ornate bed and all of the texturing as well. The other beds turned out really nice, just basic beds for any sort of tavern or inn, and can be used all over the place. So I hope you liked this video. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.